If I become your enemy because I tell you the truth? Lawlessness. Age-old question. Do we still have to follow the law? Well, let's see. What is sin? Well, according to what Paul is saying in Romans 3:20, he tells us that through the law, we know what sin is. Well, sin's not a good thing, right? Not something that we should aspire to, right? Well, of course it's not. And John tells us as much in his first epistle, where he says, he who sins is of the devil. And again, going back to Paul, he says that the wages of sin is death in Romans 6:23. So clearly not. Did the Messiah ever tell us not to follow the law? No. In fact, in Matthew 5:18, Messiah tells us that until heaven and earth pass away, not one jot, not one tittle will be taken away from the law. So did the apostles tell you to not follow the law? Well, Paul did. He said that we're no longer under the law. Is that what he said? The scripture y'all love to go to is Galatians 3:23 through 25, where it tells us that we are no longer under the tutor of the law once we receive faith. But if you go just a chapter earlier in Galatians 2:17, he asks us the question, if while we're seeking justification from Christ that we're found sinners, is Christ a minister of sin? No, of course not. And then if you were going to say that Paul says that we're no longer under the law or the law no longer applies, then how is it that you're going to say on the one hand that Christ said that the law will not change? He didn't come to destroy the law. And then on the other hand, Paul says, oh yeah, you don't have to follow the law anymore. How does that work? Let's just be honest. You're really looking for an excuse not to follow the law. That's really what's going on. And if you think about it, that's really ridiculous, because you're fine following the over 30,000 laws in the U.S. Code, but you can't follow the under 300 laws from the Most High, some of which you don't even have to do anymore because Christ already took care of it. Christ tells us in Matthew 11:30 that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. The thing that you really need to understand is that the law is not just an arbitrary set of rules. The laws are the Most High's character. It tells us in Romans 7:14 that the law is spiritual, and in John 4:24 that the Most High is spiritual. So if the law is spirit and the Most High is spirit, then according to the rules of analogies, remember, then the law is Yah. 1 John 2:4, he who says, I know him, and doesn't follow his commandments is a liar, and the truth isn't in him. So following the law is knowing the Most High. The law is his character. That's one of the many reasons that the Messiah had to be sinless. People can only imitate most of you, but the only one that can perfectly imitate you is you. Yahusha perfectly imitates YAHUAH and therefore must be YAHUAH. And Malachi 3:6 says he doesn't change. So from YAHUAH to Yahusha to now, he doesn't change. So if he wanted us to follow the law back then, he wants us to follow the law now. Now don't misunderstand me. There's more to it than just following the letter of the law. That's what the Pharisees got in trouble for. There is a spiritual understanding of the law. But if you know the spirit behind the law and don't follow it, you're not faring any better. So start to get a spiritual understanding of the law instead of just trying to do away with it. After all, it is for your benefit. He didn't give you the law to please himself. Remember 2 Timothy 3:16? All scripture is given by inspiration of Yah and is profitable for doctrine, for correction, for reproof, and instruction in righteousness, that the man of Yah may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. So the law included makes you thoroughly equipped. It makes you complete. And then if nothing else, remember who it is that actually teaches lawlessness. 2 Thessalonians 2:3, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. Verse 9, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders. So who's teaching you lawlessness? 1 John 3:4, whoever commits sin commits lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness. And also remember Hebrews 10:26, for if we sin willfully after we receive the knowledge of truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. So if we are willfully sinning, if we are willfully being lawless, then the sacrifice doesn't matter anymore. Then the Messiah died for nothing. Is that what we're doing?